and we're ready to go.
Okay, just so I'm going to call the meeting of the Town Services and Outreach Committee for April 3rd, 2025 to order at 10 o'clock in the morning, and welcome everyone. And this meeting is being conducted by a remote means. The authorization to do this has been extended through June 30, 2027, according to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025. And this gives the ability of public bodies to meet remotely by a hybrid manner, which is what we are doing today. So with that, I wanted to make sure that all members of the committee can hear and be heard so that we know that we're in compliance with that. And so I'll start with Councilor Ryan.
Here.
Councilor Lord.
Present.
Bob Hegner.
Here.
Jennifer Taub.
Here.
Okay, and I'm present. So let me do a quick agenda review, and unless somebody has come in, there's no members of the public as of a couple minutes ago. But if there's no public comment, we can always come back to it later to see if anybody has come in late. There are no town manager appointments to consider. That's a standard item that's listed on all agenda. We don't have any minutes, so we won't be returning to that. The principal discussion today will be about the proposed Transportation and Parking Commission and amendments to the town council policy regarding the control and regulation of the public ways. And we will also spend a little bit of time at the end of the meeting talking about future meeting schedules and agendas. So that takes care of that. Just looking quickly, we have one attendee now who's observing. If that member of the public wishes to make comment, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we will come back to public comment later to see if anybody else is joined. Seeing no hand going up with the request, then what I would like to suggest is that in the packet for today's meeting, and sent also to members of the committee separately, is a list of initial issues that we need to determine in order to complete our work on the project. And there were 7 things on the list. And if Athena hasn't, she could put it on the screen, but it's not necessary, or I could do it too if I have the ability to share. But it has been provided to the committee. What I would suggest, if there is agreement from the committee to this, is that we begin by quickly looking at the list and making sure that I have captured everything that needs to be done. If there are any suggestions for changes in wording for the way that I have framed the issues, or any that you don't think we should be talking about, or any you want to add, I want to get those corrections made to the list. So Athena, I think, she started to share. So
Is this the correct document,
that's
Andy?
the list.
Okay, I can't edit, so just have to take notes.
So let's go back to the question. Is there any request to either change wording, add, subtract, or change order? Okay, seeing none, then I think we should just proceed if Jennifer.
I don't know if we need to do this, but just there may be some issues that we explicitly don't want to come under the commission's purview. So is that, would we want to explicitly state that, or just if they're not in the list, by not being in the affirmative list?
Are you speaking of issues? Give me an example, because I want to make sure it's not under scope.
Okay, like if new parking structures, that is something I would want to see remain with the council
Um,
and not taken out of the council's hands.
well, I think that there are issues for TPC to consider, and 1 and 2 together constitute scope. So wouldn't that fit under the scope question?
Yeah, so we could, do we want it to be part of the scope or explicitly have it not be part of the scope? I think there's certain issues that we should be clear. We shouldn't just, it shouldn't be ambiguous. We should be very clear on where we want it to remain.
There is a separate issue that I don't know if I'm going to refer to have George help us with this discussion. So one of the items in the agenda was our most recent discussion of the scope issue, and something that George had been working on with us. So Councilor Ryan, do you agree that what Jennifer's raised is really part of the scope discussion?
Well, it does involve the question of scope, but the document that we're working on doesn't include or have anything to say about parking structures. It's about basically what we're reviewing is the council policy regarding control and regulation of the public way. So I don't see how this is something that needs to be, it's simply not it's not part of the remit at all that I'm aware
Okay,
of.
that's fine, as long as it's clear if it's not. That was my question. Do we want to
I mean, I can't even imagine
it or
parking,
just
I mean, if a parking structure was proposed, it would, you know, go through a whole series of processes and reviews. I can't imagine that any of them would involve a TPC. Except maybe permits and, I don't know, as we
Yeah.
go through the document, you may see something and you might think, okay, you know, if that's, you know, but at the moment, I just don't see it as even a factor in this. But as we go through the scope, if it comes up, you can raise it again. You can say, wait a minute, you know, how would this play out if there was
Right.
a discussion about a parking structure? But
Okay,
that's my thought.
I think that I agree with that. I don't think we need to really take that up now because it really isn't in the public way policy. But we may want to make note of that, of say that things that are not covered and are not considered within the purview of the TPC. If ultimately what we're going to need to do is recommend an amended charge for the committee, amended from what was originally proposed to us. So is that answer the question for now?
yes, thank you.
Okay. So going back to the questions, then uh, I guess the first thing that we really need to talk about, and that came out of a little bit out of our discussion with with the Northampton people, is whether the TPC will make final decisions on some matters. They do not. It was envisioned in our original discussion that there would be some issues that would be. So I think that we probably need to sort of decide whether there are things that the commission, our commission, should make final decisions on, and if so, what they are. Do you have any, Councilor Ryan?
So Andy, in the document that everyone has, it's in the packet. We have already made one pass at this. And,
Correct.
you know, identifying things that at least initially we thought could rest solely with TPC, and things that we felt after discussion should come back to the council for a final decision. And I think what we should do, if people haven't done it already, is just go through the document one final time. Things are marked in red. And to say we still agree with that, or we want to change it, or whatever. But we actually have made, I know it's been a long process, and people are trying to remember, when did we have this discussion? But it was actually back in December. And the document reflects, I think, fairly accurately the consensus at that time. So if we just go through it, put it up on the screen, that's my suggestion, section by section, and just confirm that we're satisfied with the way it reads, or if we want to change it, we change it. And that should address the issue of scope.
Well, there are two types of issues I think that we had talked about. One is that there are issues that we, whether we would just vest those decisions within the commission, and then there were other issues that we talked about. I remember downtown parking being one of them, where it would not be vested in the commission. And we also have gotten into the question, which still may need assistance on from the town attorney. That was about the polls. Jennifer?
Yeah, I think maybe if we want to go through that document, because I agree with George, there's probably some items we can just agree that we want to recommend stay with the commission, and it does not have to be referred, that they can make the final decision. I would say polls would be one of them if legally permitted.
Okay. Give the doc. You want to ask to share your screen instead, George, and see if we can put the document on.
Okay.
Do you have it in Word?
I have it on my, I'm not on my computer here. That's the problem. I work with two computers. The town computer is something that anyway, it doesn't matter. Hopefully you or Athena can put it up on the screen, because it's in the packet.
Yeah.
Or everybody's just gonna have to, sorry.
Is it the changes of scope for?
Yes, it's a change of
proposed?
scope documents in the packet, and it just needs to be up on the screen, and I'm not able to do it on the
No
town
worries.
computer. Sorry. Do it on my home computer, but that's not what I'm using.
Yeah,
Thanks.
this is it.
That's it. That's it. And actually, yeah, right, that's it. So the way this document is structured, it describes the current situation in the far left column. It describes the use, and then it describes the current status, the way things are at the moment, and what the proposed change is. So if you look at the very first example, right now all long-term parking requests rests with the town manager. He provides a report. And what this proposal is suggesting is taking a burden off the town manager and putting it onto TPC. They would handle this, and then they would.
So
And
let's
back.
take that as a
And so
very
in our
basic.
initial discussion, no one raised any concerns or objections. Paul certainly didn't. And so that was the very first item.
So as we discuss this very first item, I'm just going to point one thing out, and we should get it out of the way very quickly with this discussion, and that is in Northampton, it was very clear that decisions that are being made by the mayor, who's in that role as the chief executive of the city, gets recommendations, but they're only the limit of the commission's role is making recommendations. It is not making decisions. And we had envisioned a step farther in vesting certain things with the decision with the commission. And is that where we're staying? Jennifer?
I would like to see us stay there. And for this first item, long-term parking request, I would be comfortable with the commission having the authority to make the final decision on this item.
Okay. See, Bob?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with vesting some decision authority to the TPC. And I agree with everything on this except maybe traffic controls, which we can talk about later. But I think all these are good.
Okay, so agreement number one. We'll just check that off.
I can't edit this, Andy. Are you able to make notes? Are you making notes?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm also doing that. So
Okay.
between the two of us, yes, Athena, thank you.
Thanks.
But we're responsible for making sure that the notes are taken. Thank you.
It probably is available if you'd like to have it Word. I mean, it was in prior packet, and I think I could send it to you if not. But let's just continue on.
Yeah, I think 2 people taking notes is fine
Um,
instead of 3.
I think that's probably right. So George, you want to continue on?
Yeah, my thought is if we just, and the numbering and lettering refers to the actual policy document. So it would be helpful if people have it in access, not on the screen, but if they in their home computers or somewhere. So 2B, if you go and look at the current town policy document, you will see that that's what this refers to. So essentially it's making changes to that document. The next item is 2D, permanent or other parking requests. And I currently, these permanent or other parking requests, things like permanent parking changes, modification of fees, or other requests not detailed above, such as parking permit required, etc. This currently sits with the town council, and with authority to review, take action, hold public hearings, and refer to relevant committee, etc. Here we're proposing that it sit with TPC, with authority to review and hold public hearings. But here, after discussion, we came to the consensus, I believe, that they would only make a recommendation. They do not have the authority to actually decide on permanent changes or the changes that are listed here under 2D, but they would send them to the town council, and town council then would vote yea or nay. And I think the thought was, well, I'm sorry, I'll shut up.
Jennifer?
I would support this as written. I would think this should be a recommendation. for the council to have final approval. I don't know that but we'll get to this discussion later. I don't know that it needs to be referred to a council committee, but I would feel more comfortable with these kinds of permanent changes, with it being with the commission being vested to make a recommendation rather than the final decision.
Yeah, I agree. And I also agree that somehow we need to get it, communicate that this is not something that should then be referred to a committee, because that'll just prolong the agony and it'll duplicate everything that's been done. So we need to vest the authority in the TPC to think about it and make a recommendation to the town council, and it's a yay or nay vote by the town council, and we're done. I don't know if we can put that in here, but that should be the operating procedure.
Yeah, I think we have later in the list the question of whether things should be referred back to TSO.
Yeah, it's number 5 on the list. Yes.
So it is something that we do need to come to, and if we're following the process. So are we on to talking about 3C?
Well, George has his hand up. I don't know if did you want to comment?
Well, I just to say I agree with my other two colleagues. I mean, Bob raised a good point. I don't know how specific we can get in this. The way the language is written currently doesn't say yea or nay about what the council does with this. I would imagine in the best of all healthy worlds, if the council had questions about, what TPC sent to them, first of all, they'd have a chance to speak to the representatives at a council meeting. And if they still weren't happy, they could send it back to TPC with some specific questions or clarifications, or they could just vote it up or down. And we would certainly like them not to say, well, let's send it to TSO or, whatever, or CRC and see what they think. I think that we all agree that that's not what we'd like the council to do. I just don't know how we can, other than in our general report, we can just urge the council not to do that. But I'm not sure we can put it in a policy document that restricts what the council can or cannot do. It's sort of its own body and can do whatever it wants. So I agree, and I'm hoping the council will listen to us. And we'll talk about it, as Andy said, a little bit later.
Yeah, because when if you look at the second sentence of 5 in the list of questions that I structured, should the decision be reflected in the council rules of procedure. And we might even suggest language, if that was the will of this committee, that we would propose. Councilor Lord?
Yes, I also agree with my colleagues. And then I wanted to know, for each of these, do you want to hear an affirmative, or should I, if it's just there's a comment to add that hasn't been said or a disagreement, how would you like us or me to participate with this each block document today?
If you're in disagreement with the way it's going, make sure that you say so. I think that what we're probably going to do is go through the whole scope questions and then see if we want to take a vote at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Take a vote on each one. You kind of
Right.
overwhelming.
True story.
Number of votes.
Thank you.
So moving along, then we're at 3C?
Yeah, we're at 3C. This is long-term public way closures. And this is for all closures not subject to 3A, which is in the document, and not requests for seasonal sidewalk or road closures. And currently it rests with the town council in consultation with the town engineer, police chief, etc. And what we're suggesting or proposing is it rests with TPC with full authority to review and take action. So this takes something off our plate and puts it on their plate completely, and they can decide how it goes.
Jennifer?
Okay, this is kind of an extreme example. Will probably would not happen, but it, I've heard in planning board in some discussions or public comment that it might be a good idea to close off part of North Pleasant Street downtown and have it be a pedestrian plaza. So would that come under long-term public way closures? I know that's kind of an extreme example, but I would think if that kind of a, something that permanent and that would really, have a huge impact in the town, we would want that to come to the council and not be with this commission. So I guess I'm asking, could those kinds of permanent changes, if we approve this and give the TPC full authority to take action, could that kind of a decision rest with the TPC?
Bob?
Yeah, an issue came up yesterday in JCPC, which is there was a resident request to fix culverts under, I can't remember the name of the street, but it's basically flooding and eroding property because the culvert no longer handles the volume of water that comes from the current rainstorms. And the superintendent of public works said the simplest solution is to basically just close off the street at either end and just take out the culvert and let the stream just flow freely through there. That would be another case in point where this, I guess, would fall under the TPC, but there isn't really any, and I'll bring this up later on. There isn't any real process to make decisions like these. And, there are probably one-off decisions made by the council or the manager, depending on what's involved. And it's probably better to have this type of decision rest in the TPC so that they make a reasoned approach and they kind of make a decision based on what's good for everyone and not based on what, the cost or whatever. So that it's, so I do, reasonable people can disagree with this, but I do think we need to see if the TPC can manage decisions like this.
Yeah, I'm at a loss. Do you have the full document with you, George?
Yeah, I have it on the screen. I don't know.
What is 3A?
3A refers to temporary closures of, and the town council delegates to the superintendent of public works. These are, these are requests for all temporary short and long-term road or sidewalk closures required for maintenance and work. And so that seems to be non-controversial. And 2 is town council delegates to the police chief and fire chief authority to review and act on all requests for temporary short and long-term road or sidewalk closures required by police or fire for public safety reasons. Again, I think non-controversial. So it would help if we could think, Jennifer's given us an example. I'd be helpful if we could think of any other examples of long-term public way closures.
Would Bob just described closing a road temporarily to repair culverts? Is that what it was?
Actually, it was a permanent closure.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a serious proposal because the people have to use the road to get in and out.
They'd have a river on their street.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how serious the chief was.
But what the superintendent said was
Okay.
you get involved in all sorts of wetlands issues and state issues, and it's a very, very, very expensive process to replace culverts. So, I mean,
But if they close off the road, Bob, then how do people get to their homes?
well, they close it off. They can get out either side. It would just be an inconvenience to,
So that stretch would be just shut down. Yeah.
right. You know, it's
Yeah.
kind of like
All right. Okay.
there's a bridge over the rail trail right by Amherst College there that is blocked off basically.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like that.
Okay. Okay. So it is a serious proposal. I'm sorry. Okay.
It was semi-serious, but I mean, it was the only inexpensive solution
Practical, inexpensive.
to a problem that's going to be millions of dollars to fix.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, what if in the beginning, going back to the first year of having a council, the decision on Station Road was instead of a temporary bridge, we were going to long-term close Station Road and just wait until we had funds to do a permanent bridge replacement. That would have been fairly
That's a good
major,
example.
and
Right.
I think that you would not want to give that up. I mean, long term has a significance to it. Jennifer?
Yeah, I think long-term, we should maybe err on the side of caution and have it be a recommendation to the council. And if it's something that's, not controversial, I think the council would probably follow the recommendation of the commission. But yeah, for example, with Station Road, if, I do think that whoever is on this commission will be looking out for the interest of the entire town. But you could have a situation where no one on the commission is directly impacted by a permanent or long-term, not permanent, but long-term closure on Station Road, and it wouldn't even have to come to the council for approval. So I would feel more comfortable if that's the only way we can ensure that, well, yeah, I would feel more comfortable for long-term closures of the public way that it come before the council for approval, and maybe that could also be an item that doesn't have to be referred to a council committee. But it doesn't feel comfortable giving that much authority to a body that we, the council, have no direct connection to. And we haven't even gotten to whether there will be a council representative on this commission, but if there isn't, then it really is just delegating the authority. I think that's a bit of an abnegation, if that's the word, of our responsibility.
Anyone?
Well, we have 3 examples now of what a permanent long-term public way closure could look like. And they're not fantasies. They, 2 of them have happened and one could happen. And I guess the question is, are we comfortable with leaving that decision in the hands of essentially an unelected citizen plus, town staff body? And I think given some of the discussion we've had up to now, I think generally this committee has been uncomfortable with doing that. That seems to be the general. I mean, initially, my initial thought was give everything to these guys, everything. We have better things to do. Listening to you, thinking about it, I've moved somewhat toward a more position of there are, so recommendation as opposed to decision. So here we could take the language that we have elsewhere. I mean, basically take the language just above it and say that they would have authority to review and hold public hearings and then make recommendation. Because it's a permanent, it's a long-term public change.
I think so. I agree with that. But Jennifer?
You know, I was just going to agree with what George said, but I think, and again, I think that this commission should have the expertise to really review and make an informed recommendation, because I too would like to see fewer items. I know I've said this before, but being referred back to a council committee. And again, I draw from like the solar bylaw working group, where you had a committee of experts, and then, you know, I think it's good that CRC is reviewing it, but we don't bring the expertise that the members of the solar bylaw working group brought to the subject matter. So I think I do like that the recommendations would be presumably formed by an entity that has the expertise to bring those recommendations to the council. And I don't think we would have to have it referred to a council committee. This would be another one of those items.
Yeah, I agree with George and Jennifer. I think this should come back to the council for approval, but I also, you know, anytime any recommendations that comes from TPC, we shouldn't refer to a committee. We should, you know, I agree that if we have questions or issues, we can refer it back to the TPC, but we can't just replicate what the TPC has done with people who don't know what they're talking about, for want of a better term.
So we're moving this to the recommendation.
So the language would read, and this is the language that I'm going to put into my version of this, but make sure everyone, it's essentially the language that's up above. So
Yep.
it would read TPC with authority to review, hold public hearings, and make recommendations to the council. Actually, the language is recommendation, but final approval rests with town council. Eventually, we might alter that slightly and just say, and make recommendations to town council. I don't think we need the final authority. That's kind of for us, just reinforcing what we're thinking. But the document would simply say that it goes to the council for a vote. Okay.
Okay, so we on to the next item you've listed.
This is 3GI, and this one is split into two, A and B. And again, well, so at the moment, so A is anything involves a permanent change to a road or sidewalk, which involves placement of utility structures, bus shelters, benches, permanent signs, electric vehicle and other charging stations, bike share stations, addition or removal of crosswalks. It's a bit of a laundry list. And I think eventually when this goes back to Paul, and we'd want to make sure that this list is as exhaustive as we can make it. But currently that's the list. And this is the one that involves the issue of poll hearings. And so in the middle column there, it just says poll hearings. We need to have this clarified. I did actually take a brief layman's look at the MGL, and the language does refer specifically to aldermen and select board. In other words, to the elected, bodies being involved in this process. But does that mean that TPC just can't have anything to do with it, or does that mean that they can do kind of the things that we've been? Anyway, so we need to get that resolved. But currently, the way it stands is that we were suggesting that this laundry list of items go to TPC with full authority. They can handle this. They doesn't need to come to council.
Jennifer?
I'm comfortable with that, except for, just for discussion. I'm not sure how I feel about the crosswalks. And I guess, George, so we, on Amity, in our two districts, residents have a lot of concern about crosswalks. How do you feel about the final decision being with the commission? Because for all the other items, I'm good with that.
Well, one of the, I'm sorry, one of the, I think, advantages of this approach is that it says to residents and to counselors who are representing them, here's where you go to have this addressed. Right now, it kind of, you go and talk to the town manager and he talks to DPW and then they talk, and da, 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 da.
Yeah.
So at least in theory, this would clarify the process. But whether you get what you want in the end, but that's true even in the current system. I mean, that's, so right now it's more of a matter of just, you know, talking to somebody and maybe something happens, maybe it doesn't. Now it says it goes to them and they decide, and they have to have a, you know, it's in public. People come and they can make their case. They can explain why this is a problem for them and why they think it should be done. As opposed to the way it currently happens, which is kind of out of the public eye.
Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
good with that.
Yeah.
You're okay with removal, with crosswalks being in the authority of the commission?
Yeah. That's what I would say, and I think Jennifer would agree.
Yes. I mean, we did see with like Heatherstone Road, you have residents on the same street coming, they have opposite positions.
Right, right.
Which is something that we're probably going to come back to later when we talk about where that issue is going to be going and how it fits into our schedule. Bob?
Yeah, this is something I wanted to bring up with the traffic controls, but I think the crosswalks, you can argue, is a traffic control issue. Right now, the process for residents to get say a new crosswalk if they want one, other than calling up the you know, the DPW superintendent or the town manager or talking to their council rep, is to submit a resident request to the JCPC. And this came up, you know, we had some requests for traffic calming measures, and they would be things like signs, you know, flashing signs and crosswalks. And Guilford pointed out that there really isn't a process for prioritizing these, that nobody is really responsible for prioritizing which ones get there. So the squeaky wheels get noticed, at least, maybe not acted upon. Whereas other people who may not be squeaky wheels don't maybe get what they want. So I think it's better to have something like the TPC be the place where these things are adjudicated or thought about and talked about and prioritized. And then they can come back to the council and say, you know, we want to put a crosswalk here. We don't want to put a crosswalk there. We want to put a, you know, a flashing sign there. We want to reduce the traffic, the speed limit over here because we think it's the right thing to do for the broader set of people. And I think I kind of like that. Again, these are going to be experts. So experts are what better able to handle this than me. I don't know anything about traffic calming. You know, and I can voice my opinion, but it's just my opinion. So anyway, I would, that's kind of a long way of saying I like the TPC having full authority here, and I when we get to the discussion of traffic controls, I think the TPC ought to also have full authority there. So.
Okay.
So it sounds like we have agreement. Also, I would just remind everyone that this is a policy document that we are amending or proposing, and so it can be changed very easily. It's not something written in stone. So if we find after a couple of months or whatever, if at some point the council finds that there's a problem in a particular area, it can go back and revise the policy. So maybe, again, in our own thinking, we might err somewhat on the side of trying to give TPC more authority than and then see how it plays out, because changing this is not is not that difficult.
But we do need to still investigate the poll hearings question as to whether there's a statutory problem.
And if that were the case, then I guess we'd have to have some kind of separate, in the language somewhere, I'd say, except for poll hearings, which must be, held before the council. I still wonder if you couldn't have the poll hearings and all that done before TPC, and then they just send the recommendation to the council, and then the council, will that satisfy the law? I don't know. That's what we'll find out.
Yeah, did you get it's an interesting question. Did you get a feeling from Northampton as to whether the commission even talks about polls? I'm not sure.
I didn't, no.
I don't have a hand, but my recollection was that they said that their town attorney advised that they could not delegate poll hearings to their commission. But we would want to check with our attorney.
Boy, that's such an antiquated, like,
Yeah.
state requirement. I think they
You
should
know,
revisit that.
It's funny because we can delegate zoning hearings to a council committee,
Right.
but not these. But unfortunately, Mass General laws aren't written with clarity, consistency, and actionability in
Well,
mind.
we're dealing with real property, and we're dealing with, something that the town actually owns, and people want to make changes or alterations to it, put poles up or whatever. And so I think there might be a logic to it, even as antiquated as it may be. But let's see what the lawyers say. It's always great when they disagree. I love that. That could be, we could have one interpretation versus another. But should we go on to the next one?
Yes.
This is B. If we could just slide that down, the screen. I don't know who's controlling the screen, but if we could just slide that down.
Or you can.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we divided into two, and B, as you can see, is major roadway or sidewalk redesigns and other public way requests relating to roads, as opposed to parking or commons, and exclusive of maintenance and repair in the normal course of business. As I read that, I'm thinking, do I really understand that second part? I don't know, but we did in our discussion feel that these kinds of major roadway changes really do require council approval. It shouldn't just be left to a body like this. And so we broke this out, and the language, I believe, should be similar to what's above. Authority to review, hold public hearings, and make recommendations to the council is what we have for this.
Jennifer?
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So exclusive of maintenance and repair means maintenance and repair would not come to this commission. If that's just something Public Works would decide, or that it wouldn't have to come to the council for approval. Because I'm good. I don't think the council needs to deal with maintenance and repair in the normal course of business. So I just want
I
to.
think that what we talked about was 3A or B.
So does that even need, does it need to be there? If it's contained somewhere else?
It has to do with short-term just closures where you have to, you close off a sidewalk or a stretch because you're going to have to do some work or maintenance on it.
Right. So we're saying that doesn't need to come before this commission or the council, which I would agree with.
Currently, the authority is given to
like DPW or the police.
Right. Our police.
Okay.
Right.
Another question, does this, if there was a discussion or decision to make a street one way, would that come under this box?
It's not a redesign. It's a public, yeah. Well, I don't know.
So I'm just thinking, so on McClellan Street, there's parking on one side.
Mhm.
It has a lot of traffic for really narrow street, and there's been some residents have expressed interest in maybe making it one way between Lincoln and Kendrick Park. So where would that be part of this be?
Mhm. It is it would be a change, a major roadway change, I guess. And it's not obviously maintenance and repair, so I would think it would fall under this, and it would come to the council for final approval.
I'm good
But
with
that's a
what's
fair
written
question.
there in
Yeah.
both those boxes now.
Right, right. So it'd fall under B, it'd be my understanding.
So this is one where the council, because it's in red,
Yeah,
I would feel more comfortable leaving it with the council.
well, I think it's an interpretation. Jennifer raises the question. I mean, like any document, like any policy document, there's going to be, cases we're not thinking of, or, I mean, we're trying to think as much as we can, and that's why we'll have it reviewed one more time by Paul and I assume, by folks at DPW. But even in the best of scenarios, there are likely going to be places of interpretation. People are just going to look and go, okay, we want to make this a one-way street, and they're going to look at the document and they're going to say, okay, where does this, who gets to decide this? And my totally uninformed and immediate thought is, well, that would fall under B. But
And I would be good with that. Have it go to the commission and then
right,
council's final.
but somebody else could read it and go, well, it's actually, yeah, I don't know. It's a permanent change to a public way. It's a roadway redesign.
Right,
Right.
it is a roadway.
Redesign. You're changing something about the road. You're not physically changing it, but it's a redesign.
Right.
And so I think that should be pretty straightforward, I hope. Okay.
So I think we're leaving it as
Yeah.
recommendation of the council.
Yep.
I think that's right. The one place where we did make that change is North Pleasant Street along Kendrick Park. It was made into one way. And I think that was an example where it was a big enough change that somebody other than just the commission ought to sign off on that.
Yeah.
Traffic controls.
Bob has his hand up, but one of my immediate questions, what is it, what qualifies as a traffic control? But I'm sure maybe it's a term of art and it's clear to everybody else, but crosswalks, for instance, Bob mentioned, so.
Which you have under modification of speed limits,
Yeah.
limits and other traffic controls. Bob?
Yeah, I wanted to argue that, I mean, again, we could go either way, but right now there really isn't any process where we, as a town, prioritize where we're going to put crosswalks and things like that. And it would be good to have TPC weigh in on this, whether it comes back to the council for final decision or not. I could go either way on it, but I do think that the TPC should people should send their requests into TPC, have TPC review their requests, and then make a recommendation or make a decision. And I think rather than having residents make requests for traffic calming or traffic controls, that should all go through TPC, and TPC should come through JCPC and say, we would like you to spend $150,000 on these 3 controls. And then JCPC can make that decision. But right now it's just a free for all, and there's no real process. And Guilford mentioned this. He said there's no real process for prioritizing these. And so I'd rather have somebody like the TPC being the filter that looks at these and says, well, speed bumps on this road don't work. Rather than having Guilford or somebody kind of make a decision without some sort of due process. So that's my thoughts.
Mhm.
Crosswalks have generally been recommendations from DPW. And I'm thinking of the ones, again, around Kendrick Park. There was a crosswalk that was sort of place that goes directly to the playground that crosses East Pleasant Street near the Mexican restaurant, Garcia's.
Mhm.
So now they would make that request to TPC, and if we go forward with this, it would go to TPC, and they would be, at least at the moment, they would have the authority to make a decision one way or the other.
but
Of course, one of the members of TPC is a DPW, so.
it arose from DPW, that
Right.
one.
Right.
That was the point. Jennifer?
I agree with Bob. That's all. I'd be comfortable with this being, we're definitely comfortable with the commission making the recommendation, but maybe even having, I could go either way on whether they have the final approval.
But right now, we're leaving it as it's a recommendation to the council.
Yeah. I'm good with that.
Okay, speed limits. I mean, that's the
Why do we think this should come back to the council? We don't have any expertise in speed limits. I don't even know what truck limits, I guess whatever truck limits means. Also,
truck limits is
rapid
weight,
is weight. Okay. Well, again, I would turn to the experts on this. I have no idea what makes sense or what doesn't. So why not just leave this with, I just can't remember. Why did we say this should go back to the council? There must have been a reason. I just don't remember what it was.
I think that it may have been, as much as anything, that we hear from constituents a lot about it. Bob?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think this is one thing that you hear a lot about from constituents. And I mean, I think I was one who held the view that this should come back to the council. But now the more I think about it, I really think it's better to have this be through the TPC. I mean, again, I could go either way on this one in terms of, at a minimum, they should make a recommendation. Maybe we can't delegate this authority to the TPC, but I do think the TPC should be involved in looking at this and coming up with a recommendation at a minimum. So that's a good part of this. And again, I don't see, if the TPC makes a strong recommendation one way, I mean, I'd be, as a counselor, I'd be inclined to agree with the TPC's decision, rather than try to second guess it. So I don't know, but I could go either way on this.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I must have spaced for a minute because I thought that we were talking about this before when I said I agreed with Bob, and I did agree with Bob on both boxes, but B above, I definitely feel strongly that has to go back to the council. With this traffic controls, I'm actually yeah, I'll go with the majority, but I would be good with the TPC actually making the final decision for all the reasons. I think they have the expertise. And this seems like a matter, all these would be matters that fall squarely within their bailiwick.
Mhm.
George?
Yeah, I think, again, as I just said earlier, this can be revised. So if we have problems with it, we can always come back and fix it or change it. But I'm kind of leaning towards giving TPC as much authority as we can. And as Jennifer just said and Bob said, it's expertise. I don't see what the council would bring to this. I had a question about what are the RRFPs, Bs, RF, whatever they are, the rapid rectangular flashing beacons. Do they fall into this category? Are they considered traffic control? Or is that signage? But that's something that, in my district, I've had a number of requests for. And as I understand this policy, if we change it or amend it, those kinds of requests would go to TPC. And they would, but it's a money thing, as Bob's pointed out. So they can't just say, okay, yeah, we're going to put in a beacon there. We don't have the money for it. So we're going to have to, so there's the question of funding. But I kind of would like all this to be in one place, and I'd like them to make the decision. And if residents come to us, we say, well, glad you asked that question. I share that concern. And guess what? We have an expert body now that deals with this. And so that's where you need to go.
Yeah, this one I'm a little bit more conflicted about. So I do think that there are times when we hear from constituents or our own representative nature of our positions, we recognize problems, and it will get kind of weird if we as counselors make recommendations to say we want the commission to consider something. Bob?
Well, I want to kind of reference, with reference to crosswalks, there was a proposal from Wildwood Cemetery to the JCPC to put a crosswalk in there with RFBs or whatever they are, RFBs. And there was no money for it. And we kind of, Guilford kind of threw up his hands and said, well, I don't know, how can I prioritize this? So, I think, we may get some crosswalk requests coming from DPW, but they come from other places as well. And then right now, DPW sort of has to try to deal with them. And I'm not sure that that's better than a TPC, which is a body that includes DPW, but other people making that decision, people from with other perspectives. So again, I think at a minimum, I think TPC ought to be the body that addresses these things. As I said, I could go either way on whether we, final approval rests with the town council or with the TPC. I mean, it would be more efficient, but in either way, in either case, I think we need to somehow also include a recommendation that TPC would come to JCPC with requests, specific requests for traffic calming measures that require, that are beyond what is normally in the DPW budget. I mean, some things DPW can cover with their own requests, but sometimes there's more requests than there are dollars in the budget to deal with. So I think rather than have individuals coming to JCPC, I think individuals should go to TPC, and TPC should be the filter that is applied before it gets to JCPC. That was a lot of things rolled into one one comment.
But you would not have the final decision made by TPC. They would make a recommendation.
I could go either way on that, Andy. I mean, I understand the council may not want to give this up, but maybe this is maybe we say we're we're not uncertain on this, and leave it up to the council to kind of make a decision on whether or not they want to with you know, retain their authority or delegate their authority. Again, as George has said, we can come back to this. If it's not working, we can come back and change it.
This gets into another question, is that when you get Northampton situation, all decisions are made either by the mayor or the council. And we haven't really talked about whether there should be town manager decisions on any of this. This strikes me as one because you've got money involved. And maybe there should be something that if there's a significant amount of capital, that it should be with the approval of the town manager. Jennifer?
Just maybe a note, so there are going to be certain items that the TPC, part of their charge will be going before JCPC. So should we make a note to include that in the commission charge? That will be part of the responsibility, because we're talking about TPC having a representative that will go before JCPC, presumably each year, to make requests for changes that they're recommending or that they've adopted. I guess what I'm saying, structurally, there's going to be a direct line from TPC to JCPC. So should that be explicit in the charge?
Isn't JCPC only making recommendations to the town manager for what to include in the capital improvement program?
Yeah, but still, I guess what I'm just thinking is, because I wasn't even thinking that I mean, it's fine, but that is part of what we're now saying is a responsibility of the Traffic and Parking Commission, is to make their case to JCPC. So I'm just asking if that should be part of their charge when we get to that part of our assignment.
George?
It's a good question. I'll put it in the notes. I think it is a larger question perhaps is when this body is making recommendations, or actually, excuse me, well, either making recommendations or making decisions that involve the town spending money. But that would seem to be either ultimately the town manager's purview or the council's purview. If it's actually, of course, if it's a recommendation, they're just saying, we're recommending you do this, and then you make up your minds. If we're leaving it in their authority and they make a decision that this is we're going to put a crosswalk here, or we're going to put a beacon here, or whatever, they actually don't control the purse. So.
Right, they don't have their own budget.
Exactly. So if they're making recommendations or actually making decisions that involve an outlay of funds, it would seem that would really have to go ultimately to some authority that actually does have financial say. So that's really something I haven't thought much about. Is I know I want to give them as much authority as possible. I want them to give them as much leeway as possible. But in cases where the decision involves spending money, surely they cannot be the decide. They can't. That's not going to happen.
But then I think if you're going to follow the charter, which is ultimately what we have to do, it goes to JCPC. JCPC makes a recommendation one way or another, which then goes to the town manager. Town manager decides whether to include it in his recommended capital improvement program, and it goes to the council as part of the CIP approval process. So
Yeah, I was going to add that, Andy. I was going to say exactly that. That even if if TPC goes to JCPC, it's essentially a recommendation to the manager, who then makes a recommendation, either says yay or nay, and makes a recommendation to the council for the final
So
capital.
maybe under traffic controls, it should just say, and make recommendations to the town manager. So it has the authority under traffic controls to hold, meetings and reviews, etc. But the recommendation that it makes, which could involve expenditure funds, goes to the town manager, and then he takes it from there.
Okay, we can do that.
Would that make, yeah. That's a possibility. Because I think we agreed that sending it to the council, which has no particular expertise or knowledge in this area, other than, financial responsibilities. So it might make sense to just have this particular item go to the town manager with a recommendation. And he will look at this as well. I mean, he'll have a chance to review this. He's not here obviously today, but he will have a chance to review this. And if he has a problem with that, he can get back to us. But our thinking is that it should go to him because it's going to involve potential expenditure of money.
So I just have a logistical whatever question. So would the chair of TPC go to JCPC and make the request, or would it just the request go to the town manager? That's, I guess, what I'm asking. Does there have to be a formal line from the TPC to JCPC, or are we seeing the town manager as staffing? Would he be at most of the TPC committees? So
we're not imagining a role for him at the moment, I don't
Okay.
think. We haven't had the discussion, but
So I guess I'm just asking, would the chair have to go to JCPC or just communicate that to the town manager?
you did raise a good point, though. Paul was not going to be able to be here today, and we left it that in my last discussion with him that he would get the report of our recommendations, and is our next time that we take this up, at which we will also at that point get input from the Transportation Advisory Committee and any others that we choose to send it to. So it would come back to us. This isn't our final vote on it. Bob?
Yeah, I just, having sat on JCPC for 2 years, the process works that we start with a list of projects that's gone through the town manager and going out to the various departments. And it's usually more than what we can afford to pay to buy. So we have to sit and look at each one of those and say, do we really need to do that, or should we cut that from 500,000 to 250,000 or whatever? And then there are resident requests that come in independently, and there's no real way to deal with them other than to kind of pitch them into the bin along with other stuff that DPW has to do, or other departments have to do. So I think at least with roads, since the majority of requests that come in have to do with roads, or sidewalks, or bridges or culverts, but basically roadways, that I think TPC would be the logical place for people to bring specific requests to, not JCPC. Get it earlier in the process and have TPC make a recommendation. It could either be to JCPC or it could be to the town manager. It doesn't really matter. As long as they're involved and they go one way or the other, that's okay. It depends on when they get the requests and all that. So, early on, requests can go straight to the town manager, the TPC can review a request and make a recommendation to the town manager. Later on, it may have to come to JCPC. It depends, the timing, residents don't follow the schedule necessarily. So I think we should leave it open for both routes, depending on the situation, on the ground.
Yeah, it raises another question, Bob, and that is that right now we have citizen requests to JCPC around, which you point out are frequently around issues that have to do with streets, and should those citizen recommendations no longer go to JCPC first, should they go to TPC first?
I think they should. I think the TPC is a great way to prioritize the requests and, say this one is really urgent. Move it up the list. Right now it's up to, I don't even know how, Guilford was not very clear about how they even prioritize the work that they do. Unless I just think that this would be a one way to put a prioritization on it and take that out of DPW's hands and say, they need to say, DPW, you need to put sidewalk, or, you need to put a sidewalk here, you need to put, crosswalks here, flashing speed limit sign here. I think that would be much better than the current situation, which is kind of like a free-for-all.
George?
So I'm agreeing with Bob. He's saying this would help with prioritization, which is a big issue. It would help with transparency. Giving constituents a sense of agency. And the only question or thought is, then it should go back to the town manager, not to the council, is where we're headed. Well, anyway, that's where I'm headed. Not to the council, but note that currently this goes to the council. So the current policy for traffic controls simply says the town council is the body that deals with this. And we're making at least it sounds like we're headed towards a proposal that wants TPC to review it, make a recommendation, and that recommendation goes not to the town council, but goes to the town manager.
Everybody agree? Okay. Anything else? Your hand is still up, so I don't know if you have anything else.
I'm a lawyer.
So is there any need to talk about the no changes proposed section? Because otherwise we should go.
I had one question about RRFBs, but I think it's been answered. What I'm hearing and understanding, and it's maybe my matter of understanding, that really falls under traffic controls, which we've just been discussing. And item 3D is actually only concerns temporary signs. And of course, an RRFB would not be a temporary sign. So I think I can just remove that unless someone, that was a question I had, and I think it's been answered.
By the way, most of the crosswalks that go in now have the RF.
Right. If we have the money, they go in.
It's really just that there are a lot of crosswalks that don't have them.
Right.
And it's a question of whether we go
Finding funds, right. Yeah. Well, that's the scope document. That's
Okay.
and
So I think we can go on.
We've got about 30 minutes.
I know.
Yeah.
So Number 3 on the list of the questions that we started, the original list was TPCs to make recommendations to whom we've generally talked about that as part of 1 and 2, which is, so we're on to membership. And I think that we had 2 different takes on membership. One is that the original proposal from the town manager, which was actually goes back to 24, was 7 voting members, police chief or designee, superintendent of public works or designee, planning director or designee, member of the Commission on Disabilities, and 3 residents with interests and backgrounds related to transportation, design, safety, essentially qualifications that got people into the Transportation Advisory Committee. And then the other document that we have in our packet is what Northampton does. And Northampton has a larger group, and they have 2 counselors. So I think that the major issue that kind of comes up, and we've had this discussion in our committee previously, is counselor membership. And George, I have a strong opinion on it, but let me start with George.
I just for clarification, we're looking at a 7-member, potentially a 7-member body. There would be 3 resident members. There'd be a member potentially from the Disability Commission. There would be somebody representing the police department, somebody from DPW, and I'm sorry, I just missed the 7th one. Planning department.
That was the recommendation that came from Paul that
Good.
started with.
Yeah, because what I have in the packet was my thoughts. So this is good. This is what it should be. And I guess my questions right from the start is, do any of these people, would they be better off as sort of just liaisons and not voters? And do we want, because I can imagine, like, if we had a bicycle committee or commission or subcommittee, should they be voting members of this? So when I think about disability, I think, well, they should be consulted, and that should be part of what the process of this body should be. But should they be voting members? Why would they qualify as voting members? And the answer may be obvious, but that's just a question. Why each of these individuals is there as a voter, as opposed to simply, there as someone to be consulted. And yeah.
And as I look at our friends from Northampton, in some ways they aren't really dissimilar, because they have somebody from Public Works, they have the police chief, they have a parking enforcement administrator, which is an additional position. And we haven't talked about that because we have somebody within, I'm not sure who it is currently who's doing the parking work, but there's somebody in the finance department who oversees parking and hears parking ticket appeals and things like that.
But parking enforcement is under the police department, isn't it? Yeah, the people who go around and check meters work for the police department.
Yes, but if there's a challenge to a parking ticket, it goes,
Yes.
there's somebody
Goes to finance.
in the finance department. Jennifer?
Yeah, two things. So, I've been going back and forth, myself because I felt very strongly that there should be the council should select one or two representatives. Feel like I'm willing to let this go since we have certain items that are just recommendations. I wouldn't feel comfortable with the council not having a liaison, a voting member, an official member of the TPC if final decisions were going to rest with the TPC. And again, if the TPC, wasn't making decisions on parking structures or certain items, that we can. So that's where I get, and I know this is not the conversation we're having today. Do we explicitly have to? I would feel more comfortable if we're not going to have council participants and representatives on this body, that it be clear that there's certain items that are going to remain with the council. Because I worry when all of us here may not be part of this body anymore, that there not be any ambiguity about what the intention was. So there's another item that came up when I was first on the council that we haven't really pursued, but I think at some point we should get back to. And this is in Lowell, where UMass Lowell, the city does not give parking permits to vehicles that aren't registered in Lowell. So if we wanted to adopt a policy, I don't know if it would be a bylaw, it probably wouldn't be a bylaw, but that in order to obtain a parking permit in Amherst, your vehicle had to be registered in Amherst, so Amherst got the excise tax. Would that be an item that would go to TPC, or would that remain in the council? And I guess I'm still not kind of clear, could the council delegate that to TPC? And clearly I would think that would be a recommendation. So as issues come up and the council would determine that something should be referred to TPC, would the council at that point decide that they want it just to be a recommendation? I mean, this is what I'm not comfortable with, all this being ambiguous. But I know we can't anticipate every item that the council may want to delegate to TPC, or that member of the public might bring to TPC.
It's sort of an interesting question, because what you described in Lowell, is that a bylaw or ordinance in Lowell?
I don't know.
And if it is, then
That stays with the council.
Wouldn't it have to go through the council and to a council committee?
Right.
Now, the reason that I feel strongly that we should have council representation on this is getting back to a question that we haven't discussed yet. But if it's a recommendation to the council, if we don't want to have it referred to a council committee, but we want direct action, it would seem that you really should have counselors on the commission, so that there are counselors who are involved in the process of making a recommendation to the council for council action. Otherwise, I think it becomes less valid to say that it shouldn't go, that a council action shouldn't go to a council committee. Jennifer, George?
I agree with you, Andy, and that's actually well put, that if it's not going to be referred to a council committee, then it makes sense. And we could say, because we don't want an even number on the commission, 2 council representatives, and then we'd have a 9-member commission.
Yeah, if we're going to have counselor representation, I think we should have the chair of the finance committee or their designee and the vice president of the council as the two people who are on there, because I think we need to have somebody who's got the town finances in their head and someone who has the council in their head. That would be my recommendation. It could be any member, but I think those two would be the strongest to put on a commission like this.
Council Lord,
I do favor having counselors on this commission, but I also wonder, like a few years in, is it set in stone if we decide that they don't need to be on? Like, is this like a permanent? I think we should. But then also if we found out, oh, they're really not needed, the communication is happening, and are we setting this in stone that it couldn't be changed a few years down the road?
I don't think it could be changed down the road. What do you think, George?
Yeah, it could. It would go to GOL and it'd be a process and it would take some time, but that's the same is true for, if we decided to change the policy. So we can alter the policy as a council and we can certainly review the charge. We go back and look at the charge and make changes. So that's certainly possible.
Yeah, it's not a bylaw change.
Exactly. No, it's certainly doable. There's no question. I've been the one who's, I think of this group, the least eager to put counselors on this body, for a host of reasons. All of them are excellent. But one of them has to do with the fact that we already have a lot of stuff on our plate, and now we're adding something more. But that's, I'm also concerned that that it would attract, I just, who would want to do this? And I'm somewhat concerned that it would tend to, be something that only a very small select group would want to really be involved in, and I'm not, that concerns me. So I like Bob's idea of making it, associating it with specific committees or positions. So the vice president, for instance, currently has no real official responsibilities, which is fine, speaking personally. But this would be a way that you would take it out of the, because you know what it's like when we have to make these decisions. And so if you just had it that the two council reps would be the vice president of the council, and a I guess the finance chair or the designee from the finance committee. And that would, meet Andy's concern, which I think a number of you have sympathy with. It would mean a 9-member body. I like smaller bodies, not larger ones, but Northampton's doesn't seem to have that problem, so I imagine we can survive. So we'd now be looking at a 9-member body, and we'd be suggesting that the council reps be chosen by a specific position or description, as opposed to just, making it free for all. I just really don't look forward to that kind of situation. We have, so enough.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I'm good with that. And I'd like Bob's suggestion that the finance chair or their designee, because the finance chair may have a very full plate, so.
Mhm.
I have a full plate.
Good. All right.
And should it be vice president or president and
Well, I should definitely be vice president, I think, because the president already has 55,000 things to do.
Way too much.
And
No one will want to be president.
no, I
Yeah.
just,
I am interested in the fact that Alex Jarrett is council president and a member of the commission.
Yeah.
He seems perfectly happy with it.
Yeah.
well, maybe it's because they have a mayor.
He doesn't have to go to every function, right?
Right. There's a fair amount of work that gets taken care of that he's, anyway, who knows why? Maybe he's a glutton for punishment, but I think for the sake of both present and future presidents of the council, we should, if we're going to make this recommendation, it should be the vice president.
I did have a question. In Northampton, did the commission elect the DPW director to be the chair, or is that position always the chair?
We don't know. We didn't ask that question.
And that is a very good question. But again, in terms of, would you allow the body, once it's formed, to make up their own minds about how they want to, or do we want to dictate to them that you must make the chair X? I'd be reluctant to do that unless there was a really strong argument about why it would have to be the head of DPW. It
I don't
seems that
think
any
we
one of
should.
those people could be fine, and it would be a matter of their time and energy, because it's really as much a public relations job as it is anything else, and communicating with the council.
Yeah, and the chair said it takes a lot of her time.
Yeah, I get the sense that, yeah. So I don't know if people feel like we should just dictate and say this is what the chair should be X. Should we leave it up to the body to decide?
Well, yeah, and that was another one of the issues that I identified in number 6. How should leadership of the commission be determined? And I put that in parentheses by election of TPC, appointment by the town manager, automatically by role in government, such as DPW superintendent. So this is an issue that I had on the list. But, Bob?
Well, I'm kind of torn a little bit by this. I think the commission would be more effective if they just elected their own chair and vice chair, because there could be 1 or 2 members of the public that are just perfect as chairing this body, much better than anyone we could determine ahead of time. On the other hand, having the town manager, giving him the responsibility or her the responsibility to select the chair, I could go with that too. But I don't think we as a body should say that, we think the DPW should be the chair, or the vice president of the council should be the chair. I think that should be either left to the town manager or to the commission themselves. And it could rotate, it could move around,
Right.
There's no reason that you have to have one person be the chair of this forever.
Right. That seems, yeah. And this is the town manager's, he appoints this body.
Right.
And actually the only real appointments it sounds like he would be making would be the resident members. If we go with the proposal we're thinking of, whether it be, I mean, the finance chair would have some choice, I guess. And I guess DPW could designate somebody and so on, but essentially the appointments are made in consultation with them by the town manager. So yeah, I like the idea of letting them make up their own minds, and for all the reasons that have
I
been
mean, we're giving them a lot of responsibility.
yeah, they should feel right.
They should feel like they
They
can
should be able
choose
to
their own
decide
chair.
that.
exactly how they want to, right. I've lost track of our list, Andy. Have we covered, what are we missing on your list?
We've talked about membership. We've talked about the question of if TPC makes recommendations to the council, is it referred to a council committee? And
We do, length of terms, is that part of the committee charge?
which
Would be, right.
Length of terms?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Typically 3 years, right?
I
Given the
think that's
nature of
what
this pro-
TAC is now, 3 years.
Yeah, I think,
but I think we should stagger the members of the public so that, we get the first commission ought to be 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year appointment, and then every year one one resident member would change.
That's what finance does?
We don't do it quite as frequently.
I
as
think that's a good idea.
But you know, that it helps to keep the churn a little bit.
So next time, we definitely need to bring a draft charge, or soon we need to bring it. I don't know. Andy will
That
decide.
was the plan that
Yeah.
you and I, as
Right.
chair and vice chair,
We'd draft a
do
draft.
some drafting
charge,
for the
yeah.
next committee.
But that's a good suggestion of staggering the terms of the resident members. I think that makes sense. Leaving the composition, leaving the decision of who's chair and vice chair up to the body. That wouldn't even go in the charge. I don't think that's just wouldn't be there. And it sounds like we're agreed on 9-member body, and that includes a representative from the Disability Commission. Is that what I'm hearing?
Okay with that.
And my question about, we could think of other groups like bicycles or pedestrian, whatever. I mean, they don't, but fine. So 9 members, 3 residents.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
with 3 resident members, there's no reason why members who are part of, the Safe Bike to School couldn't
couldn't put their name in. Exactly right.
yeah,
right.
couldn't be part of the
Exactly.
commission.
Right,
you know?
right.
Yeah.
You could make the same argument for disability, but
To the extent that we've looked at our neighbor to the west as an example of guides, they list a subcommittee of bicycle and pedestrian subcommittee. We didn't ask about that. But
I mean, again, just noting they
it is
don't
and
have
what their
a
relationship
disability.
is.
I'd say
They don't have a member from.
I'd leave that up to the commission is if they wanted to. I'd put in their charge that they could create subcommittees
Right.
if they want to, and leave it up to them. I mean, there could be other subcommittees. I don't know.
But they wouldn't be members.
Oh, they're not members?
Because I'm assuming the way that but I'd have
Oh.
to ask Alex, the Northampton charge is written. They have subcommittee, bicycle and pedestrian subcommittee, but how that's appointed and what the relationship is to the commission is something that is a question to be asked.
Okay.
So I can follow up on that. Where are we with the chair question? And we can leave it.
Leave that up to the committee.
I think we leave it to the committee.
The committee and not the town manager.
Mm-hmm.
I would leave it to the committee.
I would too.
They're I think that the chair has certain powers, but they don't have all the votes. So
Out of curiosity, I will ask because I need to contact him anyway. Ask Alex if the chair is automatically the director of their DPW department, or if that just was the person selected and how it was selected.
Because on other town manager appointed committees, he doesn't appoint the chair, I don't believe.
No, but each one is unique, and this one is definitely unique. I don't know in the license commission. Is he appointing the chair? Well,
I don't know.
the answer
I
to
don't
that either.
I want to push back just a little bit more, and I apologize, it's getting late, but as you see, there is no voting member or representative on the Northampton commission for a disability commission or a committee, whatever. And yet there seems to be consensus here that we should do that. And this is a transportation and parking body. And I guess I'm wondering, I'd like it to be clarified to me why we think this should be, our commission should be different in that regard. As opposed to, it would be understood that this body would consult with the relevant constituencies. But we're actually putting a member of that particular commission on here as a voting member. And I just want to hear why you think that's appropriate. And I'm noting again that Northampton doesn't do that.
Jennifer?
I think, I know that TAC often refers, before they make a decision, they confer with the Disability Access Commission, which this commission could also do. So is this something I'd actually want to ask Paul, if he thinks that there should be a representative on this commission, or if the fact that they're their own commission means that the two bodies could confer. So I guess I don't have a strong opinion. I'd be interested in what Paul's thoughts are on this.
Okay, I'm going to ask Paul that question. And do remind you that he gave a draft committee charge to us that started this process in 24, and he listed a member of the commission as being one.
I forgot that.
You could have language that we've seen in other charges where you say you have four residents instead of 3, but the charge would say the manager should consider the following, as potential appointees. And you could include pedestrian, you could include disability, you could, but it's left ultimately the town manager, also left to the community. If people feel strongly that they want to be on this body, then they should step forward. We could also suggest that he consider that in his appointments. But I'm just, it sounds like the others are also, but struggling with why they should be given a permanent voting position. And also now the point Jennifer just made, of course, they have their own commission as it is. So now they'd be on 2 commissions. And so I'd like to hear what Paul thinks, and I'd like us to think some more about the logic of this.
Okay. Trying to get that into my list of questions to ask. Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, whatever we do, we need to keep the number odd.
Right.
We don't have a tied vote.
Well, that's why I'm suggesting 4 residents. In other words, you
Yeah,
could make it 4 residents and with some suggestions to the manager, but we'll see. We'll see what Paul says, and
I
we'll all
agree.
think about it some more, but.
Yeah, someone on the Disability Access Commission, there might not be someone who wants to be on 2 commissions. That's
Right.
just in terms of time commitment.
Time commitment, et cetera. I think,
And there are going to be a lot of issues that they care about, and there'll be a lot of issues that
if they won't.
they don't care about.
Right.
The last, I was going to just throw out one thing because I observed it when I was looking as I was sitting here during our meeting at the Northampton charge. I'll follow up on this question when I talk to Alex. They list him as City Councilor Ward 5 as opposed to President of the Council. So does the council choose those 2 members themselves? That's the question that I'll pose to him out of curiosity and let you know what he has to say, but we have to do with what is right for us. And right now we have a plan. The one issue that we haven't talked about, I think, of that list of 7 issues I identified is, should there be a mechanism for members of the public to submit requests on transportation and parking matters to TPC? If so, do we have a recommendation for a procedure? Bob?
I think we should follow the procedure that we have for capital requests, in that there's a form that people fill out, available on the website, and it's submitted. I think that works very well. And if, we need to educate the residents, if this comes into being, that, this is where they would send issues related to roads and crosswalks and things like that. And if it comes to JCPC, JCPC should forward that on to the TPC. So, but I think the process should be that, there ought to be a way for people to submit a request, through the town website, or, in person or whatever, for people who don't use the internet.
And who are we going to charge with the responsibility to process those forms? Who does it for JCPC? Is it Holly, or is it?
I don't
They
know.
come through, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Athena.
They come through a form center online, and then Jen LaFountain generates them into the individual documents. And then Melissa also works with them to create a list. So it takes lots of hands.
Because Northampton has a form that you fill out online too. And my assumption is that it goes to Donna Lascalia now, but I don't know that for sure.
And who are we suggesting would be the staff liaison? Or are we? It's going to be planning. I mean, where's their extra human power for this? But this would require a staff, I assume, some kind of staff assistance.
I think the town manager should answer that question.
You designate.
Yeah.
Okay. So we need to ask about that as well.
So right now, the finance director has a role in receiving citizen resident request?
Because it's a JCPC issue.
Oh, for JCPC, not for,
JCPC.
yeah. I mean, is it something to commute?
You muted yourself, so we couldn't hear your question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would it make sense to go through the communications, through Samantha?
That's another person who would be involved in something that, I mean, for the JCPC requests, that's a finance department issue, so.
Right, but the Transportation Commission isn't so much that.
Many hands
Right.
beg for light work.
That's not true.
I know,
Director.
except in town government.
Yeah. Um,
So I think that where we're at, since we are 12 o'clock, and there has been nobody else who's come from the public, so public comment, we'll just note that there was none. But I think that where we are is we need to that I need to work with George and follow up with all of the questions and start the process of developing a revised proposed committee charge and amendments to the policy and the traffic, whatever it's called, policy.
Mhm.
So I think we pretty much know what's going on. We do need to consider next meetings and what are issues we need to get onto next meetings. And one that I was reminded of by Paul was Heatherstone. That there was an understanding that, and we had talked about it previously, that we would schedule something possibly in May, which would be a opportunity for people who have strong feelings about that to come back and revisit the issue and be able to make so that we can recommend whether to continue the current configuration of the street. Jennifer, your thoughts? Any?
No, I wanted to, another item that I would appreciate an update on at the next meeting is where we are with the waste hauler RFP. If the consultant's been retained, when we expect them to come on board. I heard something about that we were waiting till the next fiscal year, but the finance committee and then the council approved $75,000 in free cash for this year. So the next fiscal year's budget shouldn't really have any, they're two different, one shouldn't be affected by the other in keeping us from moving forward on that.
It's my understanding that he's had trouble finding somebody with the appropriate expertise to help develop the plan, though he did have someone in mind now.
But if Paul's at the next meeting, maybe,
We can just
I'm sorry,
ask.
if Paul's at the next meeting, perhaps we could ask him to provide an update.
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask him about his schedule and if he's going to be able to. He's taking off, as you know, a number of Thursdays for personal reasons.
Yeah. Or maybe he can just give you a response that you can communicate to us.
Bob?
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of go back to how should members of the public submit requests? Maybe that's a question we should ask Paul, because I think he may have different ideas than I have. And I don't want to get people involved who don't necessarily need to be involved. So.
But we were going to report to him on today's meeting and what all we came up with ideas, and ask for his input at the next meeting. So anything that we talked about today, if he has comments about it, he's going to provide them for us. Councilor Ryan.
So looking ahead to next meeting, we're going to report back on what Paul, whether he's there or not, we'll report back on what Paul's input is on all these matters. We'd like to think we could present a draft charge and a revised public waste policy document. Heatherstone Road, I don't think it's going to be on the agenda, but you're just raising it, sort of saying, well, maybe in May at some point, we'll think about having some kind of public session or meeting. But it does seem like what we're headed for next time is pretty much focused on TPC again.
I think largely, yes, we will let in the waste hauler update.
That should be, I think, based on what I've heard, it will be fairly brief. But we need an update. We need to know what the plan is or isn't. Okay. Is there anything else that we're missing or that people think we should? That's what I'm hearing. And it sounds like you and I might want to sit down with Paul face to face if we can and go through this with him. But
Yeah.
again, it's a question of scheduling, so we'll see. But
Dana, can you think of any other issues that we should be listing for next meetings?
I I would have to go back and check my notes for TSO. I have too many windows open to do that right now. But I can check in with you before the next meeting.
Okay.
I think there may have been a referral that I can't think of right now.
There was one referral, and that was the public urination.
Oh,
Thank you. I have to, I think
The
that
one
went to
that we-
GOL. I have to go back and check. I don't recall right
That
now.
sounds like something GOL could handle.
No, I think that I do think that may have been
it was
referred to us, and
referred to us.
so
Rats.
we need to schedule a time with probably the police chief or whoever he would recommend, and Councilor Haneke, who's the sponsor.
And there may be some appointments. I don't know. We don't know about that, but Paul may. have
That's
appointments.
always on the list.
Exactly, right.
Okay,
Right.
so
Right.
I don't think we have anything else. Does anybody else have an issue they'd like to raise? Seeing none, then I guess there's another motion that would be appropriate.
I move to adjourn.
Second,
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Council Lord,
Aye.
Council Bob Hegner,
Aye.
Jennifer Taub,
yes.
Council Ryan.
Aye.
Well, I'll go aye also because it passed anyway. Anyway, thank you.
Thank
Good.
you. Good meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Bye.